Hello, hello Kim. Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. Hello
Good.
everyone. I am Jean Yao, a biomedical researcher and a health coach.
I'm Kim Fox, registered dietitian specializing in integrative and medical nutrition therapy.
We have this live Dymo chat on Dymo Health Facebook page every Tuesday and Thursday. We talk about healthy nutrition and healthy lifestyles. Please follow us for more information later. Today, we are discussing the topic of leftovers and food safety. As one of our followers asked how long they could safely keep leftovers. Kim has been an expert in this area for many years, so today she will be telling us how to prevent some of the top food safety issues she would frequently see, and then how long it is advised to keep leftovers before they should be thrown out.
Well, to start with, each year there is an estimated 1 in 6 Americans that get sick from food poisoning every year. And again, these numbers are only estimates because foodborne illness often goes unreported, which makes it very difficult for us to actually track the exact numbers that are perhaps out there. Now, food poisoning affects 128,000 Americans every year that end up going to the hospital as a result of this. And it is actually responsible for 3,000 deaths. So food poisoning is really not something that we should be taking lightly. Symptoms of food poisoning often go unnoticed. It can be things like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, fever, weakness, headaches. And because these symptoms can oftentimes be related to a host of other things, that's why the thought is that there's so many unreported cases. So Jean, do you think you've ever had, or do you know if you've ever had food poisoning in the course of your life?
Yeah, I had experienced several times, like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abnormal cramps. Yeah, yes, I did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I've had it at least 3 times myself. So yeah, it's probably something that's going to plague everyone, unfortunately, at least once in their lifetime.
Yes.
So I've been actually a food service or trained in food service management for over 10 years and had to get my certificate of sanitation as a result. So every 3 years, I would have to take a 4-hour course, pass an examination, and that would allow me again to maintain those credentials. And so how I've used this certification is when I go into the facilities that I consult for to make sure that they are, following the state and federal food safety guidelines, because we want to make sure that the clientele that we are responsible for are going to be, living up to having the highest safety measures within those facilities. And truth be told, if I had not been a registered dietitian, I would have either been a microbiologist or a sanitarian, because these invisible little critters that can cause both harm but can also cause good are something that really intrigues me and still does to this day. So this is an area that I really love and am passionate about as well.
This is a very, very valid certificate.
Yeah. So I bet you didn't know that about me, did you?
Yeah, yes.
So we're going to start out by talking about the essential things that bacteria need in order to survive. So there's actually 6 things, and many of these are the same things that us as human beings have to have as well. So we have to have food, and we have to have proper time, or they need acid and temperature, time, oxygen, and moisture. And this is often something I ask when I'm quizzing the individuals or the workers at some of my facilities. I ask them, what are the 6 basic things that bacteria need? And I wish they'd remember, but there's an acronym and it's called FAT. Tom, and that's why I've underlined. So FAT Tom, again, you've got the FAT, the TO, and the M. So hopefully that acronym will help you remember what these things stand for. And one of the things that to me isn't so intriguing about bacteria is at the rate of speed that they grow. So in the right environment, bacteria actually double every 20 minutes. So if I have 20 bacteria, within 20 minutes, it'll then be 40, and another 20, then it'll be 80, and another 20, it'll be another 160. And so it will continue to grow at that rapid pace. So as stated in the prior slide, one of the things that bacteria needs in order for those right conditions is proper temperature. And so that ideal temperature for bacteria is actually between 40 degrees and 140 degrees. And this is what we call the temperature danger zone. So therefore, we want to keep our cold foods less than 40 degrees. And when we are cooking or maintaining our hot foods, we want to make sure that those are kept at over 140 degrees. Now, if you look here, we know the human body, what's our temperature supposed to be at, Jean?
Our temperature, I think it's 97, 98.
Yeah. And so it's going to vary just a tiny bit for people. But look, even the human body is within that temperature danger zone. And so that's what makes our bodies an ideal place for bacteria to grow and survive. And that's why we're susceptible to foodborne illness.
That's why we have so many microbiota in our body.
Yeah, exactly. And someday we're going to talk about that, aren't we? The good bacteria.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
So I looked up because the information when it comes to what is required for individuals in the facilities that I consult for, and even within the restaurant industry, they have a lot more foods that they have to be mindful of when it comes to food safety. Whereas, things aren't so tight or strict within our own homes. So according to the Center for Disease Control, the top foods that can really increase the risk of foodborne illness are any raw or undercooked meat, seafood, or shellfish, are milk, dairy products, and soft cheeses, raw eggs, sprouts, raw flour, and, dough. That's why we shouldn't be eating raw flour, although it doesn't seem very appealing to me. And fruits and vegetables. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the concerns with fruits and vegetables here in just a minute. So, Jean, have you ever eaten any of these types of foods that I just mentioned, either raw or in an uncooked state?
Well, yes, sure. Like salmon. So that's, when you eat sushi, that's very easy or very normal to eat those raw fish, especially like raw salmon. Yeah. So I like sushi, but I kind of, at some point I feel like I'm afraid of those raw fish. So now I just don't eat that sushi very often.
Yeah. And I know a lot of the health benefits with sprouts, but because they're so difficult to clean, that's what makes them a real good harbor for bacteria. And yes, I've had beef tartare before, and for those of us that are middle-aged, a little older, we probably remember the Rocky movies where that he would have the like 12 raw eggs and drink that down. So yes. Yeah. And I remember as a kid, I got pretty sick eating cookie dough, but that was a good experience for me. I never did it again. So these are the top foods that we should remember.
Yeah.
So here's a picture I came across. Jean, is there anything in this picture that might feel a little off to you at all? Any concerns with anything here?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the bag in the water. I think there's a frozen food in the bag, but if there's a hole in the bag and then you put that in the water and there's no running water, so that would be really maybe if you leave that for a long time, that will be contamination. The other thing is about this red cloth over there.
Yeah.
I think that looks dirty to me.
Yeah. So exactly right. This is not the best way to be thawing food. And you're right about those dishcloths. Bacteria love to grow in those damp dishcloths and sponges. And so ideally, when we are using any kind of a rag like this or a sponge, we want to have it in a method or a place to hang it so that it can certainly dry out as much as possible. And then ideally try to change it every day, or I'd say within at least a couple of days. Because what people don't know is or realize that, okay, right now you've got all this bacteria that's in that rag. And once you dampen it or wipe it again, then you're wiping over the counters, you're actually spreading more and more of that bacteria around on your counters and your appliances and so forth. So something to keep in mind. So good. You picked the two things that I noticed in this picture.
Yeah, thank you.
And so when we talk about, how should we be thawing food? I think that this is actually the way that many people do thaw their food is at room temperature. And this really is not a good way to do that. So there are safe ways of thawing. There's 3 recommended ways. And the first one is to put your food in the refrigerator. And again, this is going to take anywhere from 1 to 5 days. Based on, the type of meat or how big it is. So like if you're doing a 25-pound turkey, for instance, and it's frozen, it's probably going to take 4 to 5 days. If you're doing maybe a pound of ground beef or chicken, okay, that might just take 1 day. So there is going to have to be some advanced planning using this method. And if this is the method that you want to choose, then it's important to put that meat on something that will catch those possible meat juices as that protein that source is going to thaw. And then you also want to place that on the lowest shelf of your refrigerator. Any idea why we would want to place our meat on the pan or on the plate on the lowest shelf of the refrigerator, Jean?
The lowest shelf?
Yeah.
Of the refrigerator. Oh, I just no, I'm not really sure. Normally, I don't. I put the frozen foods in the refrigerator, but normally I don't put it at the lowest shelf.
Okay, so if it's something like berries, not as critical. But if we have something like meat, which again has a lot of bacteria in it, we want to put it on the lowest shelf of the refrigerator in case those meat juices drip. If it's on the lowest shelf, it's only going to go, hopefully, ideally, onto that lowest shelf. If we have things like raw produce underneath it, things that we're probably not going to cook, then we've got that increased risk of contamination. So
that's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
So that's why. Okay, the second one is keeping things running under cold tap water. So we want that under 70 degrees. So, so this is a method you could use to thaw. If, say, you took out some hamburger, for instance, you wanted to use it later that day, you could put it into a container and then have the water constantly running over that. So that is an approved method. However, if this is something that you are using all the time, you might, see the outcome of that on your water bill.
So you just keep the water running for several hours if you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So probably not the most highly effective method. In fact, I've never used this method because of that. But that's as the ice crystals are forming, with the thawing process, that it's just going to keep kind of are washing those away. So they, again, aren't collecting and then keeping the food at a colder temperature. And then the last method is part of the continuous cooking process. And so with this, if you forget to pull something out, okay, just keep in mind that it is going to add probably 30 to 50% additional cooking time, again, depending on how big, the pounds or whatever we're talking about. So, in that event, yes, sometimes I do forget to pull the ground beef when I'm making tacos. So I just fry it up frozen. It takes a little bit longer, but it still works. Or if I forget to pull my roast or my chicken, then I just either add extra cooking time, but more often than not, I probably end up throwing it in the crock pot. So
yeah, I do that too. Yeah.
So these are the proper methods of thawing. Now, we don't really advise using a microwave for thawing our meat just because we get uneven thawing. So you might actually have the outside edges of that meat where it's cooking and it can even get a little bit rubbery, whereas the inside of the meat is still cold and can possibly still be frozen. So not a recommended way for safe thawing.
Well, you know what, Kim, I do this combination of microwave and also uh, uh, cooking process,
Okay.
together. So
Yeah.
just halfway thawed in microwave and then put that in the pot and during the cooking process, that makes easier. So
Yeah.
is that the right way to go, or it's
I mean,
not very correct?
you can do it that way. It just means, I would, on the microwave setting, I would thaw things very slowly and keep an eye on it. I wouldn't just, push something where it's going to thaw for 15 minutes and then, you kind of set it and leave it. So if you do something that's a slower and kind of, you can constantly watch it to make sure that it's not getting overcooked on the edges, then I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
And then, as I said before, fruits and vegetables. And the problem with these is that they often contain pesticides. Again, we also have bacteria that is, on the outside of the skins. And then lastly, and not so appealing, but depending on where our produce was stored, they could certainly have rats and rodents and other types of these little creatures and end up with some droppings and urine and so on and so forth. So it's important to also be washing these items as well, but using good old water and a scrub brush can help get off a lot of that debris. And even things like melons, it's advised to wash the outside of. And it might seem a little silly, but again, as soon as you take your clean knife and you put it through the top of that melon, now whatever bacteria or germs or whatever will now get onto the outside of the meat. And now you've pulled it through into the flesh where you're going to be eating that part. So I know some people do also like to use a produce cleaner. And so I have put a recipe here. And so just kind of swish soak. I know Heather Carpentier, who we often have as a speaker. I know that she uses a type of product similar to this. These types of washes, however, don't work very well for our berries and other types of fragile items. So when it comes to leftovers, oftentimes I know I like cooking once and eating more than once. So oftentimes I'll purposely make additional so that there will be leftovers. But then once you make those, in order to keep those leftovers safe, it's important to reduce that total amount of food to a lesser quantity so that we can get it cooled down faster. So when you're doing this, you also want to make sure that you don't put a lid on that food item until it's completely covered down. Sometimes too, I might even use ice. So in order to help cool down my soups and especially much faster. So for, if you can't remember, like, what was that? Do I use a 2-inch? Do I use a 3-inch? Don't worry about that. The goal here is just basically to take a larger amount of a soup or stew or casserole, whatever it is that you are making, and then get it into smaller containers. So a lot of times if I'm making a big pot of soup like that, I oftentimes will use 2 9x13 baking pans. And then I just try to keep the contents less than 3 inches, put those in the refrigerator. And then the next day I'll transfer it to my smaller containers and then pop them in the freezer. So any idea, why do we want to reduce the big stuff to the smaller pans, Jean? What would be the purpose of that?
I think first thing is you cannot drink all of the soup at one time. So then you need to separate those, and then so that's decrease the contamination. That's first thing. And the second thing, maybe some food you need to get into the frozen part, and then so that would be easier to store it. So
yeah,
that's what I think.
Yeah, and ideally what we want to do is we want to get this hot food out of the temperature zone, that 40 to 140, as quickly as possible. So that's what's going to reduce that bacterial growth.
Okay.
So here are some recommendations for safely keeping leftover foods. And as it looks like, most things looks like you can keep for about 4 days. But if you're ever in doubt, you want to make sure that you throw it out. It's better to be safe than sorry, so that you don't end up with the ramifications of having foodborne illness, which can last for hours up to several days. In fact, I've had stomach cramps as a result of food poisoning for up to 3 weeks. So, and if you are looking for more specific information regarding food storage, then this is really a great site where you can look at the foodsafety.gov. So I encourage you to check that out.
Hey, Kim, I see this mostly are like carbs and proteins.
Yeah.
How's about the veggies?
So if I'm doing veggies, and I'd say you could probably still do that within the same length of time, maybe even a little bit longer. So these things are mostly because, again, of that protein content that is going to make that bigger difference. So veggies, I would say you could probably keep longer.
Okay. Okay.
And then not only is it important to get those leftovers cooled and reduced, but then we also want to make sure that we get those reheated to at least 165 degrees. And that is to be able to kill off as much of the bacteria as possible that has been growing under refrigeration. So there you have it. There's our food safety tips and how do we handle leftovers. And so if you ever have any further questions or concerns when it comes to any of your leftovers, the U.S. Department of Ag has got a meat and poultry hotline, and here's the toll-free number, 1-888-674-6854. And again, here are the references I used to support the information that I presented today. And with that, Jean, do you want to tell our audience what we'll be discussing next time?
Next time, please join us Thursday when we will talk about 4 steps to keep food safe for you and your family. Until then, have a great day and try to get outside to enjoy the beautiful day. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.